Yes, I think so.
Okay, then I guess we're on.
Yeah, and then
That
post
was.
Let me see.
I see Al, his schedule is for the 19th.
Yeah.
If we have to do another meeting, can we find another day? I've got to be at the Board of Reps in Stanford that day.
Yes, we can work it out. Yep.
That's
So I'll
a week.
announce that today.
Is that a week from today?
We'll try to figure out. What's
The
that?
I think
19th.
this would be a week from today? No.
That would be a week from today.
Mhm.
So
Or
we'll,
can we do
I'm
it?
sorry.
Kind of
It's up to you
right
guys.
Can't do that.
Okay.
Let's go. It's recorded.
Hello. Remember where I am.
Okay, city notice. New Haven 2023 Charter Revision Commission will convene at the following days and times, meeting room 1, and in the automatic chambers located at the second floor of City Hall, 165 Church Street respectively, to do the work the commission files. The 6th of July, meeting room 1, discussion of the board of all the recommendations, issues to be considered by the commission in language drafted by council for the commission. July 11th, 6 p.m. Aldermanic Chambers for action on a report to commission language drafted by council for commission. July 19th, 6 p.m. Aldermanic Chambers, final action for the report of the commission language drafted by council and the commission. For order, Michael Smart, Chair, Honorable Richard Furlow, Vice Chair, Honorable Ann Schwartz, Secretary, Test Michael Smart, Town Clerk for accessibility related accommodations, 946-7651-946-8582, TTY, draft language can be reviewed. Public comment, testimony, and request to testify should be submitted via email, New Haven testimony at newhavencc.gov, 2 p.m. on the day before the meeting. These meetings can be viewed on New Haven Board of Alders YouTube page. I'll start to my left. Please, Sal DeCola, Ward 18, member.
Jack Keys,
Serena Nielsen, Georgia.
Richard Furley, good evening.
Good evening. Mike Smart.
Ann Schwartz, Sarah Trevino. Patricia Mountain.
Thompson.
Steve Mendick, thank you.
So tonight should be a pretty brief meeting. It shouldn't be too much. I just want to note, and we can discuss it later on for the 19th. I know we have this on the notice, but that meeting looks like we're still working around the date, so we'll get to you as soon as in the next couple of days as far as an alternative date, because there may be some conflicts.
Yeah, one of the things I want to say, Mr. Chairman, if I can, I'm going to call the Stanford Board of Reps acting that night. I don't know if I could be in Stanford, it'll be a problem. If I can do it by Zoom, if we can start at 6 here, I don't think we'll need more than an hour, and I can get.
So anyway, we want to
We'll
just,
talk about that.
yeah, we'll have that.
Thank you.
We'll put that out there. So we'll hear from council, and then we'll hear from our vice chair, and then we'll move forward from there.
All right.
Okay.
So we're going to deal with 4 of the items tonight, because let me just point out, and thank you, it's nice to be here, everybody, it's cooler than it is outside. It's getting warmer as the day goes on, it's amazing. Shouldn't work that way. So if we go through the recommendations, the 2 big sections that I had to deal with at the request of the majority leader and the board leadership were item number 1, which is Article 6 of the charter, and Article number 3, which is, or not, item number 3, which is Article 7 of the charter. So let me talk about those for a few minutes. I think that's what Al handed out to you. Those chapters of the charter were handed out to you. And we're still working on the department section. In fact, the majority leader and I are meeting with the Corporation Council tomorrow at 3:30 to see if there's other things we can do. It's in pretty good shape at this stage. We've moved an awful lot out. If you take a look at the sections, you'll see structural differences between the what is presently in the charter and what will be in the charter if this charter is adopted. If you look at the table of contents for Article 6 in the current charter, it is vastly different. It delineates a number of of departments. It's real precisely to see how many of them are, but there's 20 sections in the current Article 6 of the charter on the departments, where you delineate and lay out all the departments. The way we restructured it, I guess Section 1 is similar, if not identical, dealing with the authority to establish the departments. Section 2, general requirements, are identical. No powers have been changed there. The appointment authority, there will be a minor issue there that needs to be addressed. The Court Counsel is still a constitutional office. But when you start getting to Section 5 through Section 9, what you see are functions. You see the finance and administration and functions, administrative, operational, and infrastructure functions, administrative, operational, public safety functions, community service functions, economic development functions. So what I'd ask you to do is take a look, and if you see those functions are adequately described, good. If they're not, if you think there's other ways we can describe them, I have a number of people around this table who are quite experienced in the Navy government and know the government pretty well. I'll be happy to talk about those. I am meeting with the Court Counsel tomorrow, as I indicated, because there's some functions principally in the finance area, controller's position, that are derived from the old special act. There are old provisions that are still here that talk about daily deposit of funds. Do we need to govern daily department of funds in the charter? It seems to me that we can move that to the Code of Ordinances. It seems to me it can be part of a job description. And I want to talk to the Court Counsel about that. If the two of us agree, and the majority leader will be part of that meeting, and maybe other people in the administration, we will talk about that. Some of the other sections, like payment by the city treasurer, payment of city funds, we'll take a look and see if we could, narrow it down to the essence. If there's a constitutional standard that you shall pay if something happens, we want to make sure that there is a mechanism in the charter that provides overarching constitutional standard for the local governments. Those are the kind of issues that we are looking at. The purchasing agent position, there's still quite a bit in the purchasing agent section, because 10 years ago in the last charter revision, we added a lot because we wanted to make sure that the standards were established. There were broad standards, not telling the agent how you do your job every day, but what the broad standard should be when you adopt an ordinance, to make sure that we have a system that is that works, the system that is operated by the rule of law. So that's principally the major changes that we made in that section. In Article 7, boards and commissions, you will also see that most of the boards and commissions are still named in the charter, but we've created basically in Section 3 and Section 4 two new categories. And what we've done,
Just a point of order, Mr. Chair. We're having some issues with the recording, so if we can just pause it and get that set. I heard talking and it was
Yeah, I
recording.
hit the wrong button. My apologies. It's recording now.
Okay, we should be all set.
you don't want me to repeat, do you?
No, we have it
All
recorded.
right, good. So thank you, sir. On the board and commission sections, what I recommended, and actually what you and the alders appear in support of, is breaking down two different standards, or two different categories of boards and commissions. Ones are the boards and commissions that are actually created in the charter. They're important, critical bodies that are created in the charter: Board of Ed, Board of Ethics, Board of Assessment Appeals, Civil Service Board, City Planning Commission, Board of Zoning Appeals. All real critical functions that you don't want to modify on a political level, that you want to take a look at every 10 years, every 8 years. If there's a real problem, it can be a charter commission. If there's a real defect, then you can fix it. We moved a number of boards in Section 4. Board of the Financial Review and Audit Commission is Commissioner Keys will remember, that's the old Board of Finance. Our Our buddy Leon Medvedow chaired for many, many years, that we got rid of in the late 1980s, and it serves more long-term finance views, Board of Police Commissioners, Fire Commissioners, Park Commissioners, Public Health, Library, Civilian Review Board. Those are all mandated. You need to have every one of those boards, but they don't have to be constructed in the charter. They can be modified. And those who are active in the police world, for example, in spending a lot of time on the development of police commissions and civilian review boards, when we created, as the chair will remember, we created a civilian review board of the charter 10 years, and it was, I don't want to say dubious, but I can say it now since we have statutory authority for it. It was a real hard pull to make that work. We now have a statute. And so it's a wonderful opportunity for the Board of Alders to take a look at the Civilian Review Board in the context of the statute that was passed 3 years ago by the legislature and rebuild it, but it's mandated. You have to have one. And that's the difference. And then obviously we already had these provisions 5 and 6. You have the authority anyhow to create boards and commissions by ordinance that existed. It just laid out constitutionally in the document. And it talks about consolidation or merger. Really interesting provision. One of the things I've seen around the state, I don't know if it's true in New Haven, but it's true in other places. It's harder and harder to find people to populate boards and commissions. The civic culture has changed a lot around the state, where you have a lot of empty boards and commissions. You have some mayors, not this mayor, not this city, to my knowledge, that allow holdovers, allow people to stay on boards and commissions because they don't want to go through the process of advice and consent before the Board of Alders, the City Council in their community. Having the ability to consolidate functions is a very useful tool that the Board of Alders and the mayor could probably use if they find that there are commissions that have similar functions where you're having a hard time with quorums, you're having a hard time finding members, and maybe consolidate them to accommodate that need. Or there was a big need in the 1940s for it, or the 1980s, and there's not as much a need now, consolidate with another entity. So I just wanted to point those two things out. So the final language on city government departments will be available for you. It will be available next week. I will make the changes after our meeting, and I'm sure the court counsel will take some, we'll look at these sections carefully, and we will hopefully by our next meeting have that done so that we will be able to finalize it. Boards and commissions, with the exception of the Park Commission, which we'll talk about probably at the next meeting, will be addressed next week. There is one change, though, that I have.
I'm sorry, 5? You're on 5?
I was going to, I haven't gone to 5 yet.
Okay.
I'm on 1 and 3. I just dealt with 1 and 3. I'll go back to 2 first in a second, but I wanted to point out that one of the things that I thought I got direction from the Board of Alders, and that was to make sure that boards and commissions have finite terms of office. All right, and we all know what that addresses specifically, but to make it clear that the terms have to be finite. So it's 5 years, 3 years, 2 years, whatever it is. We have a maximum number of terms. So I added the word on terms of office when you're creating a board or commission to have a finite term, so that when we move boards and commissions out of the charter into the code of ordinances, the Board of Alders will have to take into account the mandate of the charter to have finite terms. So does everybody understand that thinking? Yes.
Do we have that language yet?
It was in the document that I gave to Al yesterday.
So, Section 4, boards and commissions required. Section 5, appointed boards and commissions. Can you, just, I'm a little lost.
Or let me tell you, it's section, it's Article 7, Section 2A1.
Keep going backwards.
Sorry. Which,
Just tell me what it is, Steve. So I don't-
yeah, I'll tell you. Hold on, let me just get to it specifically. Second.
No, 5, I got it.
You already got it?
Yeah.
Yeah. And in the current,
That's the trick.
here it is. So if you go to section 2A1, the current language is the number of, you have to have in an ordinance, the number of board and commission members and alternates, and terms of office. I added the word finite terms of office, so there's no question about that, which may be staggered. So the addition is the word finite in subsection 1A1. And that will help us address, when we discuss the Parks Commission, that will help us as we discuss that issue next week. Any other questions on this? And I just hope that everybody has the draft. We should make sure you get a red line of this document so that you have it before the next meeting. Oh, here it is. All right, when I have it, but please take a look at it and feel free to call me, call the chair and have the chair, whatever, make sure that I know if you find anything that needs to be addressed. I apologize. Sure.
Steve, will we be able to get you're doing the meeting tomorrow, you're gonna be able to do the changes, revisions. Will we get the document before our meeting next week?
That's my intent.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, Al. Appreciate it.
So, may I go on, Mr. Chair? So the next change is item number 2, which is consider alteration of the current charter-based residency or elector standard for employment of department heads and other key positions. It's generally department heads and deputy department heads. And what I think the board was heading in the direction in that place, and that is section 12 of Article 2. If you have, I'll just handed out the charter. It's subsection B and C. And the language should be, has been revised or will be revised with your recommendation or your approval to allow for the adoption of an ordinance. So the default standard is elector. You need to be an elector. But the alders have the ability under the charter by ordinance to relax that standard, to make it resident or to eliminate it completely if they choose to do it. I think that was the direction that they wanted to take with respect to department heads. Not department heads. We're not dealing with the other issue. No, department heads.
Department heads, yes.
Yes, okay. No, I was very specific about that. The other issue is in subsection D. We're not going to discuss that tonight. That would come up. So sections B and C address that issue so that by ordinance, when they're going through this process, if this charter is approved and we're starting to move these departments out and the job descriptions out of the charter into the code of ordinances, the administration will make their case before the board of alders as to which departments need to have a standard or not have a standard. And it'll be up to the alders to make a determination. It almost eliminates the need for a waiver provision if the alders have that ability to do it by ordinance. So that's something we should probably think about a little bit before we send the final document back. Do we need the waiver if we're going to have the ordinance bill, the waiver for department heads? All right, so I just wanted to raise that. So that's that issue. Any questions? So the default is elector, but the alders have the ability by ordinance to alter that for department heads and deputy department heads. If I missed something, Mr. Majority, let me know.
If I can, Mr. Chair, I'm just hearing the language. I know it was not the intent of the board to issue waivers.
Yes.
But the board wanted to move these into our code of ordinances and have that public hearing and then make the determination, if there were any determinations after the public hearing, which departments should be by elector and what departments, elector and what department heads or department staff would not be necessary.
So,
We don't want to it wasn't the intent of the board to suggest a waiver.
the waivers in the charter, so what I just said was, we're moving into the code of ordinances, which means we should probably eliminate the waiver that's currently in the charter. We currently have a waiver provision in the charter. So think about that, let me know.
Okay.
You see my point? Yeah, so I thought the intent of the board was to move into the code of ordinances, let the legislative body make that determination, work with the mayor can veto anything the legislative body does. And it probably means you don't really need a waiver at that point, because the relief that the mayor could seek is to come to the board of aldermen and modify the standard by ordinance. You don't need a waiver.
Okay, so if I made one question. So then it stands to reason then that what we have to do is, in order for these departments to move into a code of ordinances, we have to deal with the electoral piece that is in here.
That's what I did. In this section, it requires elector.
Is that something that we have to vote on to approve?
You would, yes.
Okay.
And then ultimately, all of the
Yeah,
voters
really.
have to approve it.
Okay.
Yeah, so that,
I'm doing process in my.
No, that's okay.
Yep.
the intent of the language, and please look at it carefully, and I ask anybody to look at it carefully. I did not eliminate the waiver. As I was talking here, I started thinking that we need to get rid of the waiver, because you don't really need the waiver any longer. It's in the charter, so it's not something we put in the charter, it's something that's in the charter as we speak. It's a section that Alderman Marchand came up with regard to boards and commissions. We somehow put that provision in 10 years ago, dealing with board and commission waivers, but it was also department head waivers. But with this change in language, we don't need a waiver for department heads any longer.
Okay, so, and I'm not asking my question correctly, I apologize. So I'm wondering if we need to remove the waiver in the charter. And you're saying that we may or may not?
No, I'm saying if you adopt an ordinance standard, you should eliminate the waiver provision regarding department heads. Whether you want to do it for boards and commissions as well is another question. Right now, the waiver deals with the electoral requirement for a department head and for board and commission members. And so my recommendation is if you adopt the standard where you could modify the electoral standard by ordinance, then you don't need a waiver. That's the waiver, in effect. You get to do it when you're creating the departments, and if one of the departments still has the electoral requirement, and the mayor makes a compelling argument, you just modify the ordinance to allow the mayor to hire the person that they'd like to hire for that position. But you don't need a waiver. I'm agreeing with you. I think the waiver should be waived. We should eliminate the waiver.
Because if we leave the waiver in the charter, we can't create it by ordinance.
Well, you could still, it gives two alternatives. If you don't want to approve a permanent change, you don't want to move away from the electoral requirement in that department for ever, but you have a unique opportunity with a department head, you may say to the mayor, exercise the waiver standard as opposed to an ordinance change. So you still could serve a purpose. But I look at the ordinance ability as the ability to waive the general rule. And so I don't think you need to create two different standards. That's all I'm suggesting.
The waiver in the charter is person specific, right? The waiver that Steve is talking about would be general.
Department.
Waiver for deputy assessor is gone, right? So that there's an exception for title. The charter is per person. Right?
Correct.
I'm doing car insurance for too long, but yes.
That's it. There you go.
If that made any sense.
No, it did to me.
I'm a little confused.
All right.
And I don't mind admitting it, my head is spinning, because I'm just trying to figure out when we go to vote and we want to create an ordinance to eliminate an elector position, are we actually granting that position a waiver?
Permanently.
Well, it's a,
Still change.
it's a permanent waiver as long as the ordinance is in effect.
Yes.
Because the default is still elector. So if 10 years from now, you have a board of alders that doesn't like all of the changes you made a year from now, the next 6 months, whenever you do it, they can go back to the elector standard. It does not eliminate the elector standard. In effect, it's a waiver by ordinance, but you're going to be doing it more systematically. You're not doing it as Commissioner Keys just pointed out, you're not doing it for the individual. You're going to be doing it for the departments, because you're not going to have all these department heads before you in the next 6 months. They're in their offices right now. But you're going to make the changes in the departments based on a recommendation by the administration, presumably, or by your own action with consultation with the administration. And so it's not individual centric, it is office centric. You may decide these offices really need, these people need to live in the city. You may relax the elector standard and say they should be a resident as opposed to an elector. So you have that flexibility to do a number of things, or just eliminate it completely, but you can resurrect it because it's still the default standard of the charter.
So it sounds like the recommendation is to leave the elector in the charter and add on a clause that says that we can also waive it by ordinance.
Yeah, the specific language is every appointed public official, this is shall be an elector of the city, this is all elected public officials, unless in the case of department heads and deputy department heads, unless otherwise set forth by ordinance, would be the language that would be there for department heads only. It doesn't address the issue of boards and commissions, just departments at this point.
That was the intent that we had wanted. Thank you for walking me through it.
I want to acknowledge our president, Walker Myers, is joining us, and Alder Herrera. Welcome, please.
Okay. And that's dealt with in both B and C. The next change is item number 5. And item number 5 is found in about 4 different places. But I'll tell you what it is. The board has asked that we restore the current language in the charter pertaining to the bipartisan representation of alders on boards and commissions. The commission had recommended allowing, if there are multiple seats on a board or commission, allowing 2 alders of the same party, since you have a 30-member, one party system here, and I think the alders recommended that we go back to the current standard, which means if you don't have another party, you're not going to be able to fill both seats. And so I basically, in the document, give you alternate language to go back to that standard, if that's what you, if you agree with the alders on that. And let me just say from the perspective of how these things work, keep in mind that when we send the charter back to the alders, if you retain the system that you've recommended, if you believe devoutly that what you did was the right thing, they have the alternative of rejecting it and going back to the language anyhow. So either way, the alders will have the upper hand on this issue. I just want to explain that's how charter revision works. And also when we bring it back, they can't amend. They can only deal with things that are in the document at that point and reject them individually or reject them in its entirety. So on this particular issue, it's a pretty simple fix. This is what they've asked for. They could probably get it whether you go for it or not. I just want to explain that. So I basically have recommended restoring the language that was in there. Those are the 4 items we were discussing. We have 2 other issues that we're looking into. One of them is part of the board and commission section. The alders we're not, did not accept the concept of a phase out with regard to the permanent members of the Parks Commission. I think that the insertion of the finite term language helps address that issue broadly, but we'll deal with that issue at the next meeting. And I will have some research on the issue of dealing with commission members regarding the legality, the ability of somebody other than an elector to serve on a board or commission, and deal with that standard as well. As I've indicated, I think it really, for boards and commissions in particular, we're addressing it on the department head side, but board and commission in particular, I would feel more comfortable if there was an express grant of authority. While we have a lot of administrative authority under Title VII, it's not eminently clear, but I'll provide you with more of some legal advice on that at our next meeting. So those are the two outstanding issues. So I don't know if you want to vote on anything tonight, or you want to just wait. But I want everybody to look at the document. I will make sure, after I meet with the Corporation Council, I will make sure I get another red line out to you with corrections. I will also, the sheet actually has the reference, little cheat sheet references to the sections. I'll make sure I send this out with all the sections, so it'll help you go through the document as well. Nothing else, Mr. Chair?
Yeah, and I think, since, we're meeting next week, so we can just vote all the items down.
Yeah, we can do that, yeah.
And then we forward to any other questions that we can have. Also, I just wanted to mention too, the secretary is available. She's certainly welcome to meet tomorrow.
Oh, if you'd like to
Folks,
join us,
looking at her.
3:30 at the Corporation Council's office.
Check with my boss.
All right. I think she's here.
We'll give you a waiver.
Okay, for a minute. Okay, good.
You got a waiver for the bar.
Just want to make sure. Just want to make sure.
Just get our waiver for the bar.
I do want to invite somebody, it's not my office anymore, I don't get to invite people to the office, so I want to make sure it's okay.
Commissioner.
She is a commissioner.
Commissioner.
No, absolutely. Wonderful.
All right, so any questions from the commission? Okay. So next week, I guess our next meeting, we'll get together.
I'll let you know definitively about, let's keep it in the book. And
We'll talk tomorrow.
yeah, I'll let you know after I talk to her.
So there's a change. We'll have our staff send it out tomorrow and let you know. We'll get this up together.
And we'll get everything out to everybody.
Sounds
Okay,
good.
super.
All right, so motion to adjourn.
Motion to adjourn?
All in favor?
Merge.
All right.
Thank you.
Have some food in the back for you guys.
My pleasure.